This is Rooted by the River, an SRC parenting podcast. None of us have parenting figured out, but I'm so glad you're coming on this journey, a journey to grow as parents while we raise and disciple our children. Rooted by the River is here to equip your family to root deep in the living waters of Jesus and his love. I'm John Homas, the family pastor at Spanish River Church. Today on the episode, I have Jill Dagistino, therapist at Spanish River Counseling Center. Welcome, Jill.
Hi, welcome. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. Hey, I was watching a YouTube clip of one of my favorite TV shows from when I was a kid, The Wonder Years. And there is this really awkward scene where Kevin Arnold talks about how sex education comes into the school and all the boys are excited to learn. And it is this totally awkward moment where the gym teacher is trying to explain female reproduction to these junior high boys. Okay. And they are like so excited to hear about it. And then it's completely awkward.
Yeah.
And I think that captures a lot of how parents actually feel about talking to their kids about the birds and the bees.
Yeah, deer in headlight.
Deer in headlights, that's great. You and I recently did a seminar where we tried to give parents just basically three things, 3 wins, 3 best practices to talk with their kids about sexuality and sex. And the 3 things we went over were talking about it is better than not talking about it.
Yep.
Sex is good because it's created by God and God makes good things. But then third, God also puts boundaries around his good things.
Sure.
And so I wanted to talk with you and unpack those a little bit. First of all, talking about sex is better than not talking about it. Why is that?
Well, I think that the more that we are able to talk with our children about sex, the easier it's going to become. It's kind of like you don't want to wait till they're 13, just kind of like the Kevin Arnold experience.
Yes.
Right? You want to build that foundation by having these small little conversations starting really early on in a child's age, because if you can do that, it's you're layering in the conversations and the comfort level increases both at the child's end and at your end. So sometimes parents can get like that deer in the headlight moment, and they don't want to talk about it because they don't know what to say. So they don't talk about it, and then guess where the kid is getting the information? It's either from the media or their friends, or they're getting a secular view as a Christian. If you want your child to grow up knowing what God's ideas are about sex, it's important for you to lay down that foundation.
Right. You used the word layered there. That was interesting to me. Unpack that a little bit more, what you mean by that.
Well, from a psychological standpoint, it's kind of like, let me give you a metaphor. Let's say it's a sad metaphor to talk about. Okay. If you talk about somebody that is not well with cancer, and then ultimately they end up passing away, the people that are around there kind of have been walking alongside the person who's ill, and it doesn't become such a shock. And the body and the brain can adjust more easily to little baby steps than just tragically if someone died in a car accident, and then it's that shock and awe. Right. So like I said, it's a sad comparison.
But flip that on its photo negative and think about something positive.
Exactly. Yeah. And so by layering in those small conversations, it could be as simple as, I'll tell you a story. When I think she's either 3 or 4. I'm a mom of 2 adult girls. One's 22 and one's 26. When my oldest came home from nursery school, she asked, where did I come from? And I think I probably had that deer in the headlight, like, oh my word, what am I going to say now? And I started to say, well, you came from inside. And she just kind of looked at me and she's like, no, like, where are we from? Like, where are our people from? Like, like so-and-so came from the Bahamas. So-and-so came from Pittsburgh, you want to, if you layer in those conversations early on, then when it comes time to have the more serious conversations, you've already built that foundation. And I think something else that's really important to talk about is in these conversations with our children is to use the correct terminology. Yes. Like we don't want to use slang or even use use the word the private area or anything like that. We want to use the actual terms, because then again, that is reinforcing the normalcy of everything and easing into those, what do you do with that body part?
Yeah, exactly. That's a great way to unpack layering, because I think if we're willing, when our children are very young, to even teach them about their body and how God's made them,
right?
Using correct terms, the parent might feel awkward, but usually the child doesn't. They're just learning, right? And so we can actually teach them awkwardness without knowing it if we're not willing to enter in just with open communication, and then build on that. I love your story, because we don't have to tell them everything when they're 2 years old.
No.
But when they're 2 years old, we can begin building the foundation so that when they're older, we can tell them everything. And I think we're so, it's interesting. You and I have talked about this before. We do often feel so awkward talking about sex. Yeah. But the interesting thing is, if we look at Scripture, God really doesn't blush when he talks about sex at all. If you read through the Song of Solomon, it is very graphic about sexuality.
Sure, it's like a romance novel.
It's like a romance novel.
Yeah.
And the fact that that's even in the Bible, I think, should frame how we think about talking about it. That doesn't mean we say everything. That doesn't mean we go for shock value. But addressing this Kevin Arnold moment where everyone feels awkward, I think being willing to go there with our children and being able to answer their questions as they bring them up, rather than shutting them down. You've talked about safe and open communication. What are some key things to think about with safe?
First of all, I think it's important to note that 85% of communication is nonverbal.
Yeah.
So it's our facial expressions, it's our tone, it's our body language. So if our children come to us with these really important questions, and we hem and haw, and we get, kind of moving in our seat, and I don't know, ask your mother, or I don't know, ask your father, that kind of thing, that we're going to give a message to them, even if we're not saying, hey, I'm not comfortable talking about this. So I think the more that you do that when they're younger, like I said before, you're more comfortable. So it's important to use the terminology, talk about it, think things through. Look to some tools. I mean, there's a lot of books out there. I have some stacked right here right now that can be helpful, and they're all broken down by stage. Informing yourself with information, so you can't make an informed decision, and you can't figure out how you're going to communicate something unless you have that information. So doing the research yourself, I think, is also important. Validation is a huge thing. So if your child, if you say something like, oh, did you do that with Dad? Being truthful. Yeah. And not lying and say, no, I didn't do that.
Right. We prayed in the stork.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Because the stork did not just come, right? So I think validating and saying that's a really interesting question, and I could see how that would make you feel kind of weird inside about that, and then following up with questions, curiosity, like, I'm wondering, now that you hear me say this, what's going through your head? And you ask those open-ended questions back, and you sort of parrot what they're saying. I think that's effective too. If the child says, yeah, that's really weird, the whole concept of that freaks me out, you can say, yeah, I hear you saying that would freak you out. And then you can say, tell me more about that. I mean, that's,
and that's actually not that complicated when you think about it. You're just hearing what they're saying, turning it into a question to stay connected to them. Yeah.
And, going back to when my daughter came home from nursing school and asked, where did I come from? What would have been more effective for me to do at the time would be to say, what do you mean by that? Yeah.
Right.
Rather than just go, this is it. This is the moment. She's asking me the question. Yeah. What do you mean by that? And then she said, well, like so-and-so's from Pittsburgh. Where, So asking questions before you go down that road, because they might have something else completely in mind. Make sure you're tracking.
And I think in that, even in this principle of talking about it, part of what we said is prayer is so important. Both praying for your child, but I think also praying for your own, what's going on inside of you, because the awkwardness leads to fear. Maybe we don't like the way that we we're taught about sexuality.
Sure. Or not.
Or not taught about sexuality. And so much of parenting, I find, is reactive to what we didn't like, you know, and before the face of God, we can pray and say, hey, listen, here's where I'm at. Help me think about this. Not just me reacting to what I didn't like, but rather what's good for the benefit of my child.
Sure.
And I find that when I pray before the face of the Lord, it kind of clarifies those things for me.
So you use the word react. And so I think, you know, in my example and what you're talking about my daughter coming home from nursery school, the reaction is something impulsive and we don't think before we speak.
Yeah.
So if we go before the Lord and we pray, instead of reacting, which is that knee-jerk reaction where that comment came from, if we take a break and really analyze and go to the Lord for his wisdom and seek his advice and counsel, we're responding. And usually when someone reacts, not all the time, I'll say usually it's not a good result.
Yeah.
If we can respond because we've hit the pause button and we think things through and we prepare ourselves, then I think our communication is a lot more effective.
That's great. I'm even thinking about how to apply that. You get a question that you're kind of not ready for, but you've had the chance to know that a question's coming at some point.
Sure.
Hey, I'm so glad you asked that question. Let's go on a walk in 10 minutes and we'll talk about it. I want to hear what your question is. Then you have the chance to unplug, go in your room, say prayer, and then you haven't invalidated anything that they've done.
No.
I want to lean into this with you.
And I think a lot of parents, including myself, I think when our children come to us with those questions, we automatically get in that panic mode and we want to react. And I think what's important to realize is that we are giving a message to them in all that we do. And so kids are experimenting constantly in this world. I mean, they're experimenting at school, they're experimenting in their friendships, they're trying new foods, all that kind of stuff. And sex is lumped into that.
Right.
So research has proven that actually 25% of self-proclaimed Christian children have engaged in some sort of sexual act before the age of 18. And if you look at that number a little bit further, when we dig down, 55% have engaged in like heavy petting or what we might call foreplay or something like that. So if those numbers are true, and research proves they are, then we owe it to our children to be their guide and lead them, because we don't want them going to the secular world using AI. We don't want them to go to their friends. We don't want them to go to Google. We don't want them to pick up a book that might have explicit photos. We don't want them to engage in pornography because if we don't address it, they will get their information.
They're curious.
Yeah.
And that curiosity isn't bad. God created sexuality to be good and beautiful.
Sure.
And so things that are good and beautiful naturally raise our curiosity.
Yeah.
Our second point is God created sex.
Yeah.
And what God creates is good, and therefore sex is good. It's not bad.
Right.
It's not something that we have to put up with. It's like, we don't really want to talk about it.
Sure.
Okay, so but why are we so afraid to put sexuality as something that God created as good? Why are we afraid to just say it's good?
I think a lot of fear is that there's this concern that if I talk about this with them, am I opening the floodgates?
Yeah.
Like now, am I giving them permission to do it because I'm talking about it? And so that goes back to everything that we've already talked about. So I think there's a fear, and maybe, I think you hinted at this before, maybe we have our own unresolved issues when it comes to sex.
Yeah.
And so maybe our own comfort level, maybe that would, if we did some work on our own before we sit down and talk with our children, maybe that could be helpful.
Yeah, agreed.
So
even as I'm thinking about just this biblically, one of the beautiful things about the creation story, Genesis 1-3, is over and over, God creates these things that go together and they're all good. So sun and moon, right? They're of the same kind, but they're not the same.
Adam and Eve, women and men.
Well, that's where it all goes to, right? You got heaven and earth, and then, but it's not until God creates male and female, Adam and Eve, that it is all very good. And then the language that's used for man and woman coming together, a man leaves his family and he cleaves, he hold fasts, and they become one flesh. So there in the very beginning of the Bible, that term one flesh, it's not only sexual, but it's not less than sexual.
Sure.
So here we have in the very design of creation that sexuality is mentioned right away. And, as we think about that, Jesus actually reaffirms that in the book of Matthew. He talks about that very thing as something that's good. And so it's interesting, even as you think about the way God has designed us biologically, we have this thing that he's created that's good. It's beautiful in the covenant of marriage between a man and his wife. And it actually is pleasurable. And it's the very thing, that very act is what is used to grow families and therefore grow civilization.
Sure.
I mean, think about the wonder of that. Like, God didn't hide this somewhere in the Bible where we couldn't find it.
Right.
It's in the very first chapters. And yet we are afraid to frame it that way, right? Right. So I do think what you're saying is really true. We need to do, as parents, we really need to do some work on ourselves and figure out, do we see it as God sees it? But sexuality is also, it's also really powerful. And so there can be a lot of hurt and trauma there. If a parent is hearing this and they're struggling even with what we're saying, because for them, this just feels heavy and dark. Sure. What should they do?
Well, I think what we mentioned before is informing, finding out, like getting information, arming yourself so you can have these conversations, and then really taking a pause and hitting the brakes and looking at yourself and analyze what are my thoughts about this? What was I taught as a child, or what was I not? What guilt and or shame do I have in my closet that is preventing me from having these productive conversations and doing that work so you can sit down. I mean, God created us biologically. I mean, the way man and woman emotionally fit together and physically fit together. Yes. There is a physical component. If we think about it, for example, it's biologically based. I mean, men and women have urges and needs. An average male has about 19 sexual thoughts in a day.
Okay.
And
we're averaging almost one an hour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Think about that.
Yeah.
I mean, and you take out, well, I'm not going to talk about your dreams while you're sleeping, because I'm sure that's included in that.
Right.
Logical thoughts where that you're thinking about. So take 8 hours out.
Yeah.
And then you're at 16. Yeah. And then you've got 19, so it's actually a little bit more than that.
Right.
And then females, based on their menstrual cycle, have an increased libido during their most fertile moments of the month. So that's going to happen regardless. That's biological. So it would be really imperative for a parent to understand that so they can have the conversations.
Yeah. Yeah, but
because it's going to happen.
Right.
We're going to explore.
Yeah. So, but even as we're talking about it, I could hear maybe some of our listeners going, "Let's not talk about that."
Oh yeah.
And I'm like, well, okay, hold on. There would be an unhealthy way to talk about this, but we're also just talking about the way that God has designed us. Like, these things aren't accidental. Yeah. That God has wired us this way. Now, we're all broken and fallen people, and so things get distorted. People can get caught up in lust and things like that. But that doesn't negate the goodness of God's design.
Right.
He made us this way.
Right.
And he made it as something good and beautiful. But let's go from there. I know people are like, well, what about the limits? Well, that's our third point. God has made boundaries on sexuality. He has actually called us to steward our sexuality in a certain way, and therefore to teach our children to steward their sexuality and call them to the Christian ethic. So we've talked about not lying to them about the goodness of sexuality. What is important for parents to communicate with their kids when it comes to God's boundaries around sexuality?
Yeah, I mean, I think biologically speaking, again, I think if you talk about a 13-year-old to maybe a 17-year-old, part of that experimentation that I talked about before is that romantic, that puppy love.
Yeah.
And so if you talk to somebody of that age, you talked about lust and you talked about love, and then there's puppy love.
Yeah.
So there's puppy love and there's mature love.
Right.
The commonality is the word love. So even at our age, if we're talking to our children, and we might be thinking, oh, this is just, they're 13. What do they really know? In their head, though, they love that other person.
Yeah.
And so you couple that with that biological urge, then you could have a recipe for disaster.
Yes.
So it's important to validate and go back and say, I understand that you're having these feelings of love, and let's talk about what are some appropriate boundaries. What are you comfortable doing? Let's say you're in a situation where you're at the movies with a group of kids and somebody makes a pass at you. How are you going to respond? Yeah. I think that most of us would be like, oh, I can't do that.
Right.
But if you don't do it, they're going to talk about it with somebody else.
Right.
It's one of those things that it's inevitable. So if together you can explore and come up with boundaries as a unit and not just saying, here's what you're going to do.
Yeah.
If they feel like they're part of the process, number one, they're going to trust in you. They're going to come to you with future issues. They're going to lay that layering that we talked about. That foundation will be there. And they will feel like they have a say, and they don't have to listen to their peers or media or a book or a movie or anything like that. So I think that's really important to ask those questions and have them be part of the process in creating those boundaries.
I was listening to Claude and Townsend's book, Boundaries with Teens. And one of the things he talks about in the chapter on sexuality is what you're not just going for, don't do that.
Right.
What you're actually going for is to try to help them build a value system around God's design for sexuality. So
that starts like we said, way like infancy. Like
Yeah. And so actually talking with them about things that actually make you as a parent pretty frightened, but doing it in a way where you're actually able to converse with them about it and figure out their value system around those things and help them play out the implications and the consequences. Sure. I mean, you might even find that by thinking about it more about values than you're talking to one of your children about, hey, so-and-so held my hand during, during the movie. And you're like, well, what was that like?
Yeah. What was that like? That's such a great question to ask. Yeah. Because it's an open-ended question, and they're going to be able to tell you exactly what it was like.
Right.
And then you just take it from there. So keep going. Yeah.
No, but I think what they said was really helpful because most of us react. Most of us want to set the boundaries.
Don't let them do that.
Don't touch the fire, right? Don't touch the fire. And and as adults, we know the consequences of breaking God's boundaries. We do. God doesn't give any busy work. I mean, I got in trouble once in elementary school and had to write sentences. Yeah. That wasn't a real punishment. It was just it was busy work. Yeah. But none of God's boundaries are busy work. But the challenge is not using those boundaries to blast our kids, but helping us actually explore with them, why does God set a boundary there? And letting that actually infiltrate their value system can actually deepen their relationship with God.
And with you.
Because you're willing to actually talk about it with them and stay connected. But it brings up a question that I think a lot of parents have. And I'm just going to be very honest here. A lot of parents are afraid that their children will ask them a question when they talk about God's boundaries. So here's God's boundaries for sexuality, child. And then your child looks at you and says, Mom and Dad, did you follow those boundaries?
Oh, man.
And that brings up a lot of things for people because they're like, do I lie? Do I tell them the whole truth? Because the reality is most of us, well, not most of us, all of us are sinners. And all of us in many ways have not followed God's design. Right. Praise God for the gospel. that we have been redeemed and restored through repentance and faith in Christ. But there's still that moment where we look back on our past, parents look back on their past and go, what do I do with this? And that's actually caused a lot of parents not to bring this up at all with their kids because they're afraid of that question.
That one thing.
So what do you think? How do you answer that question?
Well, I mean, if you've been having these conversations and you're layering them in, I think I don't like to say have to. You almost have to. You have to ask yourself, what's the end goal here? What am I trying to achieve?
Yes.
And if I'm trying to build this relationship that my child can trust me to come to these things, and I make the decision in that moment out of panic and fear to lie, then it comes up. It is going to come up someday. Yeah. And then you're going to lose all credibility.
Right.
I think it's important to look at this as a teaching opportunity. Yeah. Where you can impart, just like you would, like, did you ever get a speeding ticket? You know, if I say, I did, then they're going to think it's okay to speed. Yeah. If you can say I did, and boy, let me tell you what happened, and here's how I felt after, I think that can be a really vulnerable moment, and that vulnerability creates connection and intimacy that strengthens that foundation. Yeah. So I can't tell people what to do. Right. I can only tell you that lying and not being truthful about something usually will come back to bite you, and it discredits you as a source. You want to be that person, that information source that they come to, and if you, it's kind of like you lose your credibility. Yeah. So,
well, I was just watching this movie, and these two parents have 3 adult children, and the middle child says, "Hey, Mom." They're at the dinner table. Hey, Mom, you and Dad got married in May, and in January, and Billy was born in May. It doesn't add up. Yeah, right. And the mom goes, "It was a leap year." And he goes, "What does that even mean?" But I think maybe just to help parents with the anxiety around this question, I think what you've done is you've framed this particular area just like any other area. We are sinners. And we are learning by the power of the Holy Spirit to follow Jesus. And I don't think that parents have to share everything. We're going back to this idea of layered communication. I mean, if a child asks you that, or a teen asks you that, you can even back up further and say, "Hey, listen, that's such a great question. Yeah. Let me tell you a little bit what it's like to be a parent. I have learned by making a lot of mistakes, and the areas in my life that I haven't followed Jesus, I've realized why he tells me to follow him, because it's painful not to follow him." Yeah. And so, in my life, my goal is to help you follow Jesus even better than I did. And that kind of takes the pressure off, like, do I share this? Do I not share that? But it's honest and it's truthful, and it helps them to begin to think gospel thoughts about their own life. Yeah. And I think you're being forward with them and relieving the tension, but also not hiding it. You're talking about your own redemption, and it gives them, again, that exposure to the idea of values. Sure. And building values. You know what? I didn't trust God in areas of my life in the past, but man, I sure wish I had, because I've learned now that I can trust God. When he tells me not to do something or to do something, he really means it for a reason. And I want that for you as well. Yeah.
I think something else important to note is that there is that redemption. And biologically speaking, God has created our bodies perfectly, exactly by design, how he intended. And the wonderful thing about it, if we make a mistake, and we do something, we cross the line, and we engage in intercourse outside of marriage, if we stop, the brain is designed to atrophy. There's the biological part. We do have these urges. I mentioned that before. And if we give in to those urges, then they get fuel, and it's like you're
rewiring the brain, so to speak.
We've opened the floodgates now, and now. So if we make that distinction in our head, and we realize, hey, I really feel bad about this. I know this is not God's design. I know that I made a mistake. And we abstain from that no matter what it is, whether it's smoking, whether it's, cheating at school, whatever that is, including sex. The brain is designed to shrink, and then those urges sort of dissipate and go away. And so you can find yourself in a better place, and that's God's design, which is beautiful. So you don't have to live with this guilt and shame your entire life because you made a mistake.
Yeah, that's so good. You brought some resources that apply a lot of the things we're talking about. What did you bring? Talk us through some of the books that you have.
This is kind of a fun book, Chicken's Guide to Talking Turkey with Your Kids About Sex, and it's from a Christian author. So this is a great one. This is just an overview, like a 30,000-foot view. This is also a wonderful resource. Mark Laser he really is an expert in the world of sex and pornography, and he is the master of this. And then there's series books. So how to talk confidentiality with your child about sex confidently, love, sex, and God.
And those build, so you start with one.
Yeah, they're series. How you are changing.
Yeah.
So this would be part of the layering. So you talk to your child about the changes that are going in their body. So then when they start to have these urges, and they happen, research has proven they happen as early as 2 years old with some of this stuff that's going on. If you normalize the body and the changes, then that facilitates and leads to having more in-depth conversations about sex. How did God made me? Like, that's an important one. Here's one, which is what I thought when my child came home from nurse. This is what she was asking me. She just really wanted to know, where do babies come from? Why boys and girls are different, which is also a good one. And then amazing, the beginning of you. So we go all the way back.
Yeah.
So when your child is 1 or 2, you get this book out and you sit down and you talk about it. I mean, it's got fun little pictures, and there's the apple with the seed. I mean, so you start building these metaphors that normalize the conversations for when they're 16. They're talking about the specific parts of their body and some of the urges that they're feeling, and that they come to you and say that so-and-so, one of their best friends, did this with this girl or boy, and you are able to have these conversations because you've started with these beginning books.
Yeah.
So stages.
Yeah. And, one of the things that I think is so helpful, I've actually got this from the Boundaries book as well, but one of the things that's so interesting is oftentimes when kids come and they have questions, or they even press in and go, well, why? As parents, we tend to see those moments as like a threat.
Oh, yeah.
But they're actually a gift, because you're actually getting what your child actually thinks. They're pressing against you because they feel comfortable not hiding it from you, but actually bringing it to you. And that was really helpful for me, just to think about applying that even in this area. As you go through these books, they're going to be curious, they're going to have questions, and they might go, well, I don't know about that. That's actually a gift, because you're getting an honest thought from them.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've talked about talking about it's better than not talking about it. We've talked about God makes good things, and he made sex, so therefore sex is good. And then lastly, we talked about talking about God's boundaries with sexuality. Sure. But one of the themes that runs through all three of those, I think, is this idea of having the idea of staying connected to your child, not ending the conversation, not shutting down the conversation. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's applicable to everything.
Yeah.
So we talked about this. If you're doing it with baseball, or you're doing it with dance, you're engaging with your child. They're going, when it comes to these serious topics, they're going to come to you. So your involvement with them is going to be integral to their overall physical health, of course, and their mental health.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great way to kind of summarize it, that you're investing in something and you're influencing along the way. You cannot control them. Yeah. You can definitely influence them. And by influencing them, to know that they can come to trust you with the little things, they'll come to trust you with the big things. And sex is one of those big things.
Yeah. Yeah. Joe, that's beautifully put. We will link all these books in the show notes, but I just want to thank you for coming on and talking about something that's hard to talk about.
Yeah, no, it's my pleasure. I'm so happy and honored to be here. Thanks.
Thanks, Jill. Thank you for listening to Rooted by the River, the family podcast of Spanish River Church. If you're watching on YouTube, leave your takeaway from this episode in the comment section. If you found the episode helpful, send to a friend or leave a review, which is a great way to help others find this podcast. Feel free to send your questions in to rootedbytheriver@SpanishRiver.com. Thanks again for listening.